All right, hi everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, regardless of where you are. We want to welcome you to our April webinar. Today, we're going to be talking about responses to coronavirus and specifically how behaviors are changing. Insights Now is a behavior research company, and we believe that studying behaviors uncovers new insights that can be used to improve speed to market and also in-market success. So let me tell you a little bit about our presenters today. I am Amy Mahoney. I am a senior researcher in qualitative insights. So I focus on qualitative research over at Insights Now. And Greg, you want to introduce yourself?
You bet. I'm Greg Stuckey. I'm the Chief Research Officer at Insights Now, and I have the pleasure of focusing on all sorts of behavioral research methods and trends, et cetera, so forth. So really excited about looking into how people are disrupted and changing. So this is really an exciting time for us as researchers. As we go through the webinar, participate with us. There's a question box on the side, and you are welcome to add questions there anytime you want. We will take a look at those. If you're having other challenges or issues, you can chat with folks with tech if you're having tech issues as well, and they'll help you out. All right, so disruption. Disruption is what we're all experiencing across the globe right now. And what's exciting about disruption in terms of behavior is that disruption always leads eventually to new habits. So when we go through this period of disruption, especially when we're disrupted in a very negative way, like we are being disrupted right now, old habits stop. Old rituals, old ways of doing your life, old products that you used to choose, all of those get challenged, get disrupted, make you slow down, take a new thought, new approach to how you make decisions. And as you start forming new new processes, new routines, you then choose new products, get new rewards, and have new cues that signal those routines, and you generate more and more new habits in your life. So the real question though, when we're getting disrupted this time, we're not just being disrupted because our cues are different, our routines are necessarily different, but it's actually more fundamental than that. We're getting disrupted this time because our motivations are fundamentally shifting. Sure, there's some contextual changes for us, working from home, things like that, but at the end of the day, that centerpiece, the moment, the context combined with your motivation is fundamentally reordering. And things that were maybe second or third important in the past are now primary importance. And because of that, the types of choices that you make are changing. The types of rewards we're seeking are changing. When we think about disruption and our behaviors changing, it's really at that motivation center point. And one of the things that we like to focus on, give you a little bit of a science before we get into what's happening with the research data here. If we take our motivations, we can break them into 4 core areas. We can break them into functional motivations, social motivations, sensorial motivations, and psychological motivations. And categorizing the motivations that way helps understand and map the different types of behavioral changes we're likely to see, the different types of choices that may progress, the different types of behaviors that may shift over time. So short term, you're going to be really, really focused on functional changes, social changes, eventually moving into more sensorial changes as well. So let's take a look at how each of those are laid out so you can understand each of those 4 areas. So functional motivators, these are central to how you feel as a human. It's safety, it's protection, it's health, it's preparedness. If you know Maslow's hierarchy, this is at that base part of that hierarchy. So all the things that are functional within our life are, get changed when we go through these big pandemic type mindsets and changes. Second thing that happens is we have social motivators that shift and change. Social motivators are all about changes to family relationships, peer-to-peer relationships, who we trust. That's a big shift that happens really, really quickly, and our feelings towards ourselves. Right. If you've been keeping up on social media, you know that for those of us that have been in the stay away from other people mode or stay in your home mode for now a month, there's a lot more depression setting in, right? There's a lot more change of really saying, well, who am I? Am I really doing something productive with my life? Especially for the folks that then became out of work because of this as well. Sensorial motivators, this is not like the sensory cue that triggers anything. Sensorial motivators are all about our coping mechanisms. So sensorial motivators are how we motivate ourselves to feel better, if you will, and how we try to create new environments for ourselves that are creating sensorial pleasure. And the psychological motivators, this is really about mood change. At the end of the day, it's a simple way to think about it. It's a little more complex than that, but it's the easiest way to do it. Psychologically, people look for balance. And so you're shifting moods from highly stressed to relaxed, from bored to excited, et cetera, so forth. So you're creating mood change here with psychological motivators. All right, so let's take a look at how these break apart over time. When we get that really big initial negative disruption that happened with COVID, what we observed was that the very first thing that happens is massive amount of fear, right? And you get that big unpleasant psychological surprise that just pounds you, and people react very quickly, very negatively. Anger will, sometimes be involved in that, but usually very, very, very short-lived. But it's that, man, I have to move. It's the "who moved my cheese" type of metaphor that people often talk about. And then immediately after that, all your functional motivations become much, much more important. So you're worried about your basic needs being met, and so you start stocking up, you start changing around what you have available to you so that you know that you feel safe. You start pulling back from different types of activities that made you feel unsafe before. You start using less interaction with people. You start being, spacing yourself when you're in the store, start getting more worried about people that cough and sniffle and sneeze, et cetera, so forth. So all those things are very functionally motivating. And as time goes on, then there's the social motivators kick in. And you're seeing this a lot now, right? There was initially a lot of anger. Happily, no brands got caught up in that we really saw, where people were angry at brands and products, more that people were angry at other people, such as those that went out and hoarded materials and made it scarce for them. There's also sadness that comes along. We see that quickly after a few weeks, that craving, boy, I can't go to my favorite restaurants anymore. I can't meet my friends anymore. I'm not getting the interaction that I want. So you get this sadness and disappointment that starts layering in. And then new social sadness pieces comes in, right? We generate a lot more empathy for people. We start engaging in a lot more social activities that help other people out, local concern for local people and people around us, et cetera, so forth. So during this fluid sequence, if we focus on motivations and understanding what moves people and what motivates people over time, we'll be able to better understand what should we prepare for as people start adjusting and going through times of adjustment. And then as we get into the recovery stage from this, what are some of the new motivators that are going to come up during recovery? And then eventually, what's going to be the new normal? What's going to be the new hierarchy of motivations as we get into whatever that is, and whatever time period that is, because we really don't know what that time period is going to be.
All right, so now that we understand a little bit about some of those behaviors and motivational changes, shifts, let's see specifically what's changing as we start talking about COVID. So, first of all, we talk to our clean label enthusiast community. We talk to them specifically because they are lead indicators of change. They tend to be more aware and selective regarding product purchases. And so their behavior helps us understand what is critical and is what is nice to have. And it typically is a little bit more in the forefront than we would see with general pop. So that's why we talk to them specifically. They have some behavioral traits. So first, they tend to look at ingredients on front and back of labels. And they're purchasing specific ingredients and products based on what they believe is clean, and they're avoiding ingredients and products that are not clean. They tend to be enthusiastic, they tend to be advocates for the food industry, and a lot of them also tend to be primary grocery shoppers. So this is why we talked with them specifically. We did a lot of research, so we are just going to present little bits of research in this presentation. There is going to be a part 2, spoiler alert, coming later. But within this community, we have about 500 people, and we did a combination of qualitative research and quantitative research to share what we are about to give you. So let me talk a little bit about this timeline, just so you're clear, as we're going to be going over this over the next couple of slides. So this is on the bottom, is what's going on within the world. And keep in mind, this is not a strict timeline where we are focusing on a specific date, because things change differently in different parts of the world, specifically different parts of the country as well. So when you think at the bottom, we have states starting social distancing restrictions. What that means varied very much both by date and also by state. So some people had stay at home, some people had shelter in place, some people said isolation. How states went about doing this varied. But you can see that what we did on the top is we tried to conduct research at these different time points to make sure that we were figuring out what was going on. So at some point later, we see stores start universally limiting purchases and changing hours. Later on, as our timeline goes on, we see that schools are not going to reopen anytime soon. Most people are now officially working from home. So the whole family's at home. A little bit later in our timeline, we see that some of the stocks in stores are replenishing, and now people are startingly using masks. So of course, this is an ongoing thing. We are certainly not out of COVID, but just so you can get an idea of how our different research pieces fall in with this timeline. And now Greg is going to talk a little bit about our first piece.
All right, so the first thing we want to talk about is what was happening at the very, very beginning, if you will, very beginning being within the United States. And this was early in March. We started talking with clean label enthusiasts, and we had a survey go out where we were looking at the types of diet changes that they were making in their life. And at the beginning of March, they were already, about a third of them were already making changes to their diet specifically because of their concerns around the COVID coming to the United States, and at that point, obviously, we already had a few cases, et cetera, and it was getting to be a concern. So about a third of the people were making changes already. They were adding a lot more vitamins and supplements. They were changing the types of vitamins and supplements they were adding. They were also shifting their diet and their lifestyle in order to prepare for what seemed to be a lot of those people to be inevitable, that we would also have some type of a stay-at-home scenario, that there would be a lot of need for restaurants to close, because they were seeing this on a global basis. And so there was a small contingent that was obviously that lead indicator group saying, I'm going to make these shifts. And so they're picking things that they feel is going to help boost their immunity here, right? You've got vitamins, fruits and veggies, spices, diet, lifestyle changes. Right.
All right, so now if you look, we're going maybe a week in after some people are starting social distancing restrictions, and we're starting to talk with CLE, and we're trying to figure out, what are you buying? How are you dealing with these changes? And what we saw right away is that people are using shopping as a way to take control, where there's a lot of things they can't control going on. They can't stop the virus from coming. They can't control how other people are reacting. They can't control what's going on in the government. This is a little thing that they are able to do to make them feel like they have some control. And so what does that mean specifically when we talk about shopping? So a lot of people are picking up shelf stable items. It's making them feel safe, so they don't need to leave their house as often. They're stocking up on basic staples, so it's giving them security that they can take care of their family. This was especially important as we were first hearing, we might be quarantined for 2 weeks. You might not be able to leave your house anymore. So people were definitely concerned about, what can I have in the house that will last that long? A lot of people proactively started buying cleaning supplies, vitamins, medicines, fruits, and vegetables as a way to, again, take control, but making sure that they could remain healthy. And then the other thing that we saw is people are looking for different foods to provide comfort. So it could be in the form of dessert. It could be nostalgic foods, heartier foods, or even alcohol, but different things that they're doing in order to take control. And as we go along the timeline, this is where we start to see now people are starting to hoard. Stores are realizing that their shelves are out of stock, and so they're starting to limit purchases. They're also starting to change hours. So we talked to CLE again and said, how are you dealing with the limited supply? What are you doing in place? So this was a qualitative exercise that we did, but we said, what are you noticing is and isn't in your grocery stores? And along with that, why do you think the products are available or not available? So we're not going to dive into the whole entire grocery store because that is a huge undertaking, but I'm going to talk to some of the categories that people notice the most disruption. So with that, not surprising, cleaning products are one of the things that were flying off the shelves, specifically things that were known to be disinfecting and bleach, Lysol. Brand names here were very important. People started looking for things that were stronger cleaners. They're looking for things that will kill the virus. Things that are still available though, like natural colors. And what's really interesting about this is typically our clean label community is looking for things that are environmentally friendly. They're looking for natural, they're looking for sustainable. But as soon as this virus came, that was a major disruption for them. It was no longer about how I can take care of the environment and what's good for the greater good. It's how do I make sure that my household is not going to get this virus? How do I make sure that I'm not going to get sick? And therefore, they're looking for things that are stronger. And here I have this quote from one of our consumers here. Customers buy products that advertise they contain bleach and leave the rest alone. Advice from experts leans heavily on the use of chlorine bleach and warns that other products may not be effective against the virus. So other products might be great for cleaning, but they're no longer doing the job that consumers need. So therefore, they're turning to other products. So moving on, a couple other categories that we have. No surprises, paper products are flying off the shelves, specifically toilet paper. I would be surprised if any of you either didn't experience a shortage of toilet paper or didn't see a zillion memes along social media and other commentary about how toilet paper is now the new currency. The theory here is that really it is a daily need, and so it's important, but a lot of this was based on hoarding and social media induced panic. Not necessarily because there's a long-term shortage of toilet paper. You want to move to the next slide?
Yeah, oh. I was gonna jump in there. I'd just say, hey, if there's any behavioral people who haven't read the book Herd, this is almost prophecy, if you will, or this is a good example of what we all expect to happen and our science says should happen, came to life exactly as expected right in front of our eyes with that social media induced panicking and the hoarding and the daily need cycling through, and seeing other people do something makes you want to do that as well. So if you haven't had a chance, or you want an interesting, fun behavioral book to read, this one will definitely tell you a lot about what was happening here.
All right, so another one where we saw changes is fresh produce. Interestingly enough, this was one where most products were still available. Most people were not stocking up or hoarding produce, which makes sense because both produce is expensive and it doesn't keep well. So it's not something that they need to have on stock if it needs to last for months at a time. But in the world of produce, potatoes was something that disappeared. So you could see all the produce you want, but not potatoes. And people are thinking that's because it's a cheap source of food and it also tends to last longer than other produce. In the meat section, not surprising, specifically in the fresh meat, there's a lot going off the shelves: beef, chicken, ground meat, but also frozen fish. It tends to be central to meals. More people at home, they need to have the protein in the house, but also people found that it's easy to freeze and save. So it is something they could stock up on even if it's originally fresh. But interestingly enough, our consumers were seeing that pork was one of those things that was still available. And their theories on why pork is available and not the rest is that it might be more expensive, but also they're hypothesizing a lot of people have dietary restrictions and so maybe are not picking up that product. And then lastly, I think this is one of the places where I personally saw the most out of stock products are shelf stable foods, specifically those canned good aisles. everything was flying off the shelves. It was lucky if you could even find anything for a while. Specifically though, canned soup, canned tomatoes, vegetables, fruits, beans, meat and tuna, and then dried pasta also fit in that category. And really it's because it's easy to prepare, it's cheap to stock up on, and it's not bad. This is a source of food that you can have for weeks or months on end. There were a few things that were still available. So canned mushrooms, canned beets, Spam, sauerkraut. And really our people were hypothesizing this had to do more with people weren't sure how to use it in a meal, or it wasn't the main component of a meal. And so even if you were to purchase something like this, you wouldn't use it in quantities large enough to want to stock up on it. Here's another quote that I really liked from one of our consumers. Many people want to stock their pantries with food that is easy to prepare and lasts a long time in case this epidemic lasts. Canned foods are affordable, nutritious, easy to use, especially canned meals or proteins. So again, this is why people are stocking up on specific products. So as we're talking, things are flying off the shelves, and chances are you went to the store to buy something and you couldn't find it. So what did you do? We started to ask consumers, what are they doing instead of? What are some of those solutions, substitutions, conversions that they're doing? So if they couldn't find toilet paper and they really needed some people were using Kleenex. Some people were also using flushable wipes as different alternatives. If they were looking for meat and chicken, they might be purchasing something else. So maybe a different meat, maybe they're going to fish or pork, or maybe they're no longer looking in the fresh section, but they're purchasing frozen options. In the world of hand sanitizer, people started using antibacterial soap. Some people also started making their own. Bread is another one where people started turning to the frozen section. In cleaning materials, some people started using off brands, but still brands or products that they thought would still be sanitizing and purifying, killing from the virus. And then since people couldn't buy bottled water, we saw a lot of people talking about buying pure or filtration pitchers or systems, so that way they didn't actually need the bottled water. So now what I'd like to invite you to do is join us for a minute on this questions box. I want you to think about what are some of those creative substitutions that you've used, because chances are you've gone to the store and you've seen empty shelves as well. And as we are waiting for some of those creative substitutions to come in, I will start with one of my own. As soon as I realized that I could not buy the wipes anymore, the sanitizing wipes that we use all over the house, I realized that we needed to take advantage and make it last as long as possible. So once the wipes ended inside the tub, I noticed that there was still cleaning solution at the bottom. So I started dipping my paper towels into the cleaning solution and created homemade wipes just to make sure that I was taking advantage.
Right. Yeah, I was gonna say some of the things that we saw in my household were, like yeast was gone very quickly, so we couldn't make some of the breads that we normally would make, and so we started scouring the internet for recipes that were new to us that didn't use the ingredients that we couldn't get a hold of. So that was something that we saw. Some of the recipes where yeast wasn't needed, if you will, to get a good texture. We also talked about, like flour went away really quickly, and so actually I didn't do this, but my one of my friends who's a microbrewer had gone to our local microbrew supply store and had them grind the grain there so he could have his own flour from a grain mill. So I thought that was certainly a really creative solution to get to flour that I hadn't had thought of.
All right, so it looks like we've got some coming in. So I see here that we have one person who started using a bidet instead of toilet paper.
Yeah.
We have another person who made lasagna and froze it to use week by week to make it last longer. It looks like we also have some applesauce as a replacement for oil in cakes. So if you couldn't get the oil.
Yeah.
Let's see here. There's also some people who started using more unusual grains, such as quinoa instead of rice and some of the more common grains that they couldn't purchase.
Right. Oh, sourdough substitute yeast. That's right. I forgot about that. Yeah. I'd be hard pressed to go to my neighbors and get their yeast batch though. That's feels unsafe almost, but probably isn't, right?
Yeah, but once you have that starter, you could keep going
That's
and
right.
going with it. So that's a great
Exactly.
one.
That's a good one. I agree. Right. Yeah, frozen vegetables instead of fresh. Yep, make good substitutes. Growing your own food, growing your own lettuce. Yeah, there you go. Yeah. Easy way, even with hydroponics now, a lot of good stuff out there. Uh, Other types of beans, yeah, black and red beans to make chili. Yeah, good. I like canned instead of dry for chili. That's true. Yeah, I was noticing some in some stores, different types of products. Some stores had like all the dry ingredients ran out, other ones all the canned ingredients ran out quickly. Growing your own cucumbers too. Yep, yep. Very good.
So certainly
Excellent.
lots of different substitutions here. I welcome you to keep adding to this list. I would love to see some of the other things that people are doing. And we'd like to be able to keep track of that and share that as well. But let's keep going on our presentation just so that way we can get through everything. So
Right.
at this point in our timeline, we are clear that people are not going back to work anytime soon. People are now working from home. Schools are not reopening anytime soon. So now we're thinking of how are people changing what they're shopping for and what items are they purchasing?
Right. And the first thing that we wanted to understand was this shopping experience now is massively disrupted. So what's happening emotionally to people? So we know on the left side here, the prior to the COVID and the change that we all had to take into consideration, in general, people were reasonably satisfied, feeling calm and relaxed and happy when they shopped. Obviously there's times when you're exhausted and frustrated about your shopping experience, but in general, most people are having decent shopping experiences. But that first week of really when we started seeing people going to the store, having to, have things out of stock, weren't really sure where they were going to be. There was going to be other people around. They were frustrated. Almost half the people were saying they were feeling frustrated, which is dramatically higher than typical. More worry, more people were rushed, more people were disappointed, unsatisfied. A lot of out of stock drove that. Sad because they couldn't find their favorite brand. And you notice that the things that are normal, calmness, satisfied, relaxed, happy, 10% or less of the people were feeling those core emotions, which were central to how people felt when they shopped before. Okay. And then additionally, there was a change in the types of foods we bought and the things that went off the shelf first versus the things that are now going on week on week on week, because we're monitoring what people are buying every single week right now. And what happened was initial stock up. Frozen foods were huge, and we saw frozen potatoes, vegetables, snacks. Those went off the shelf very quickly, and people grabbed a lot of those. And like one of the quotes is, "I'm able to avoid spikes in food prices because there's real concern everything would suddenly get expensive, and keep a supply of seafood and fresh meats on heighten." Right, so it's why I stock up. And other things that came off the shelf right away were all of our staples, as we've been talking about before: bottled water and bottled coffee, canned fruits and vegetables, dried coffees, dried grains and rice. And the quote is here: people can store these for a long period of time, right? They don't have to go on back to the store to rely on these. And interestingly, though, those are the things that are not being consistently purchased, right? You get a big spike, and then the purchases are now slowing down. People don't need them. The things that are in your freezer, you're not necessarily using as often as you may think you're going to use them, or you bought enough such that you have no reason to go back to the store. So those things went quick and then are slowing down. This list here, however, this is a list now of things that we're seeing consistently, people saying, I'm buying more of these products every single week. So people are buying more eggs than they normally do on a consistent basis. They're buying more bread than they normally do on a consistent basis, more salty snacks than they do on a consistent basis. So this list, and you notice that what is on this list? It's things that are parts of core meals and snacks. So what's going off the shelf at a higher volume on a regular basis than before are all the core meal items and core meal support items and snacks. And that's because we're at home a lot more. Restaurants are closed. We need to be able to provide that food in. So that's our core piece that's continuing. And we expect that to continue as long as the stay-at-home type orders are in place and people are working from home, because all of those things now need to be provided in the home. Things that are on the rise, things that did not go off the shelf right away, but now we're starting to see an uptick. The sweets, right? So non-bar chocolate and chocolate, came off. Now, of course, there's a little bit of an Easter holiday, a seasonal effect there as well, but not dramatically. We're starting to see this increase, even though we're past that time period as well, or coming into this week. But what's interesting about this in my mind is, got to remember who we're talking to. These are clean label enthusiasts, and clean label enthusiasts, by and large, are, when they're buying products along the sweets line, they're limiting, they're more skewed towards having a slightly lower volume of indulgent type sweets in their diet. But as soon as they knew that they may be scarce or have to stay home, and they've got this fear mechanism, they're seeking comfort. And sweets are one of the ways that we deal with, in terms of food, with our need for comfort. So even here, I stocked up on donuts, coffee, cake, since I have that sweet tooth. And we saw that as a significant increase. And then other staples, dried pasta is coming off the shelf more quickly. I think a core reason behind that is it's something that people are using more frequently than they expect to be using it, because it's super easy, super convenient. They're finding with the chaos in the home that that's a very quick and easy way to make a meal. And then refrigerated juices are now on the rise. And as you can see in the quote here, that's a lot because there's this immunity connection between refrigerated juices. They're going to be healthy. They're going to keep you healthy. They're going to keep you from maybe even getting the disease, right? So there is some desire for more refrigerated juices now, as we're starting to get past the initial concern. Okay. So the question is, what are the motivations behind buying all of those? Why are people buying more of what they're buying more of? And if you go back to that graph that I showed in the beginning, where we looked at the functional, sensory, social, and psychological drivers, you'll see at the top of this list, stocking up, didn't want to run out, price, shopping less, all those things are functional. So everything that's driving the initial purchase of why I need more right now is very, very functional. And as we go through the next few weeks and months, we're going to start seeing the motivations shift and change. And again, spoiler, as we get into next month's webinar, one of the things we'll be highlighting is how these motivations are shifting and changing as well. All right, flip side, what are people buying less of? Less items than typical. They're buying less paper. Now that seems strange, right? Why would they be buying less paper? Well, because it's not available is the number one reason. So also some items here that are on this list, you would have thought, well, I thought I saw those on the things that are going more and more and more. And that is also true. So there's a group of people that are buying a lot more of it, that's limiting the supply for other people, and now they're not finding it available and having trouble getting to it. And that's an interesting process here at play as well. So you'll see here in our primary reasons why people are not able to buy as much of what they want to buy is that it's out of stock, or they're managing their budget. So they're trying to buy less of things that are typically more of their special treats, meals that they have less often anyway. So they're cutting back on some of their spending as well. So we see that a little bit because there's some perishability concerns. Don't want to buy things that they don't know that they're going to use in a key period of time. So we certainly see some of those produce items in less quantity simply because of their perishability and them not wanting to travel to the store. Okay.
All right, so continuing on our timeline, We're starting to see things back in the stores, but now there's this urge for people to use PPE out in public, use those masks. And so we talked with our CLE community again, and we wanted to see, where are you now? And we're in this time of adjustment where behaviors are evolving. We're maybe getting past that initial fear, that initial, I don't know what's going on, everything is out of my control, this panic mode. And so now, what are people doing a little bit differently? So many people said that they have either reduced watching of the news or cut it out completely. Other people are verifying the information that they're passing on to others instead of forwarding every single thing that comes in play, comes around. Many people are following their shelter in place, their stay at home, their social distancing suggestions or requirements from the state. And so what does that mean? They tend to keep close contact with friends and family because they don't want to lose that connection, but they're learning how to do it from a distance. So they're changing their behavior. It might be more online, it might be more over the phone, but it's definitely not in person anymore. People are reducing the frequency of shopping in order to not come in contact with as many people. And now they're starting to think about others, not just themselves. So how can they shop for others or provide help for others that maybe need a little bit more help? So they're starting to think about not just themselves, but what else is going on, who else needs help. And one of the things that we're seeing here is the method for purchasing grocery and household goods is changing. So not a surprise, as we track week to week, we're seeing online and home deliveries going up. Now, if you look at this slide, you might see that 22 and 13% seems a bit low compared to maybe some of the other studies that you've seen. Some of the numbers put it more at 40%. What we did here is we're tracking what you shop most often method as opposed to all the methods, because we thought this might be a little bit more indicative of what people are doing. And we expect this online and delivery to go up more and more as time goes on. So as people are not wanting to go out of the house, that in-person shopping experience we expect to go down. So then we talk about, now people are using delivery, but why? Specifically, it's to avoid contact with others. So that's a big reason. You have less decontamination needed. So if you get a box with all your products in it, you only need to decontaminate the box instead of all the products that are inside. It is convenient, and a lot of people just like the idea that they don't have to leave the house. But then there's this other factor of, you know exactly what you're getting. If you're going to the store, you have this list that you want to purchase, and chances are you're not going to find everything. Things are going to be out. With online, you might have things out as well, but the difference is you know what's out prior to your delivery coming. So you know what's going to be gone, and so you know exactly what you're getting, and that's another reason people like the delivery service. The other thing we're seeing is eating behaviors are changing. So back in the day, family meals were a big thing. And then it kind of went away to working households, two-person working households, and people just didn't have family meals. That's coming back now that everybody's at home. So home cooked meals are becoming norms, and we're seeing a lot more people searching for new recipes and creative recipes because they want to have variety. When they're eating at the dinner table, especially if they're used to ordering out or getting a lot of restaurant food. Now they have to provide their own meals at home. The other thing that we're seeing is a lot of purposeful efforts to shop locally. We want to support local businesses. People are no longer thinking about their needs, but they're also thinking about their communities and keeping their communities in business. So people are purchasing ingredients locally from farmers and dairies. A lot of other people are also making sure that they're getting prepared meals from local restaurants, not just because they want the convenience of the food, but because they want to make sure that those restaurants don't close down.
All right, so we're now getting into this period where a lot of people are starting to make adjustments, right? And we want to bring back this idea that the core question of why people are doing things are based on their core motivations. And during this time period, there's functional component pieces that are now mostly met for most people. There's going to be some, dissatisfaction. There's going to be shift from dissatisfaction to relief going on emotionally with people in their functional space, and that's going to create a new sense of stability for people. But socially, they're going to start to become more and more dissatisfied with their lack of engagement. They're going to, they're going to look for new ways to get that personal touch, and then they're going to also, the first time they experience new people, when they're leaving their house, they're even more fearful there. So there's this balance that they're going to need to be able to strike. Likewise, we saw, the search for new recipes. You're going to get both the, wow, that recipe didn't work for us, and the, oh, here's a great new recipe, combined with, wow, that's a recipe I wish I could do, but I simply can't go get those ingredients anymore, or I don't have the skill to make it, etc. It's not as good as the restaurant that I used to go to that now is closed. And then psychologically, we're going to see a huge boredom swing that's already happened for some people here and there, but as a from the big picture, the boredom piece is going to come up. So that means people are going to start seeking out foods that are going to be create greater intrigue, create more surprise for them, that are going to be novel. So you're going to get an uptick in go from buying staples to buying some things that are novel to create some engagement, create more fun, etc., so forth. As we move then into recovery and our new normal, right, what's going to happen is that people are going to start moving, as they move from adjustment to recovery, they're going to try and discover new ways to create enjoyment in their life overall, right? And this seeking behavior is going to create a lot of opportunities to introduce people to products that they may be on the shelf, but they just don't readily go to them. It's going to be an opportunity to introduce people to brands they may not have been introduced to before, even if those brands have been around a while. Remember, there's 30 to 40,000 products in a store, and people are buying less than 100 of those. So realistically, there's going to be a great opportunity to get new product introductions in as people move to a period of seeking new enjoyments. Okay. So what we don't know is what this timeline really looks like. So as we progress through time here, we're going to be moving towards understanding and trying to predict what those timelines will look like. So a few recommendations for where we're at right now. Number one, address the new motivators during this time of adjustment. Prioritize communications and marketing innovations, which are addressing the functional and social motivators. Functional, social are really big right now, still really important to people, especially moving more heavily into those social structures. People wanting to eat local, people wanting to take care of people around them, afraid that their friends won't have enough to eat, won't be taken care of, etc., so forth. Find new ways, an innovation starter idea that I threw down here, find new ways to deliver a shared social experience when you can only have that experience virtually. So if your brand isn't a tech brand, how are ways that you can create a new shared experience, right? If you're a food and beverage, a personal care item, how can you create a virtual shared experience? You may have already had some of these ideas, and maybe you even tried them several years ago and they didn't work. Guess what? Now might be a time to look back at that list and bring some of those back to the forefront. Okay. Prepare for the time of recovery. So let's continue to monitor change in motivations and align your brands and products for that time of recovery that is going to happen. And immediately you can start recontextualizing your product messages as well. As people get into this behavior of staying at home, working more virtually, the context in which your brand is seen, is going to be more meaningful if you can put it into the environment that they're in day in and day out. So think about that construct and that structure, the situational context that your brands are being shown in and communicated from, how the packaging works, identify opportunities to improve your product and your messaging to fit into the context that is more common now than it was prior. And then short-term innovations, right? Emerging changes in functional dissatisfaction, focus on how you can prioritize things that help alleviate boredom. So products that you have in your portfolio that are boredom relievers, those should get a little bit of a boost right here coming up really soon. Again, social, new ways to create social pride, either towards yourself, you're doing the right thing for yourself, or towards others, you're helping others out. And then sensorial enjoyments as we come into the latter half, new ways to create sensorial enjoyment. And then preparing for the new normal. This is for innovations that are farther out. If you're just starting new product categories, new ideas, you've got to think a little bit farther out. You got to think more towards to what will this new normal look like when it eventually comes around. So key here is we've got to monitor the motivators. And what we're going to be doing at Insights Now is trying to help get a better sense of predicting what that might look like and what that timeline might be. At this point, it's a little early on to know because we haven't quite seen enough information yet to understand what that looks like. We can see a little bit in what's happening with other countries, but it's not necessarily being a very accurate predictor for us yet. And then focus on your long-term innovation plans on how that time of recovery is going to lead to new desires, right? You're going to need to understand that at the end of the day, the contextual playing field will not go back to what it was, right? Now that people have experienced a new way of shopping and have a new way of being communicated to and a new way of interacting with people, a lot of that is going to stick around and become very valuable for them. So if you can create new environments and think about how your brands play in that hyper delivery world, as an example, that will be a benefit to you. All right. And we're continuing the research. So we are continuing to do weekly engagements with our clean label enthusiast community. We're doing quantitative surveys every week. We're going to be looking more specifically as we get into next month's webinar at specific product categories and looking at what's happening with those categories in terms of buying behaviors. And then qualitative engagements to understand why. And those engagements will be continuing as we go through the near future.
All right, so at this time, let's open it up to questions. Feel free to type into that little question box if you have any. And there's actually a few that have come through already as we were going. So let's start off with those and we'll go from there. So Greg, I'll start and put this one to you. It says, what does the team think about continued purchasing of vitamins?
That's a great question. So right now, as long especially as the fear factor is still in play, as long as there's still a concern that you could catch the disease, that people around you are still concerned about it, then we certainly should continue to see the vitamins that are related to immunity. Immunity is a big giant space, if you will continue to be valuable. The other thing is that there's going to likely be a strong hunger for new knowledge around what ingredients are valuable in this particular space. What are the types of vitamins that actually do what? Right now, vitamin C is still king in terms of immunity. So what else can be taught to society? What other new science, even old science, can be brought to the forefront to create a new education platform for people and help them think about it? So I think continued purchasing of vitamins is going to be around for a while. I think it's not going away anytime soon because as people go through recovery, I mean, there's still people catching the disease, going to be catching this disease for, a year on out plus. So it's going to be around for a while. So that means that vitamins and concern over immunity is going to be around for a while.
All right, we have another question. I can take it, otherwise I'll leave it to you, Greg. Based on what you know so far from clean living consumers, do you have any predictions on what behaviors can we see coming after the stay-at-home or shelter-in-place orders are lifted? Do you want to touch that one?
Sure, I'll give a first. So first of all, I think that one of the things that that we are predicting at this point is that a lot of the family-oriented social components that started being really, really thin, all of a sudden the families are thrown back together much more heavily, both virtually and in person. And that's going to create a new sense of enjoyment for people and a new set of habits around working with and communicating to others. So what we're expecting is that the family meals, as an example, you're going to see a continued increase even after the recovery time period and even after the stay-at-home orders are lifted. I'm expecting that you're going to continue to see a fair amount of family meal time becoming more and more valuable to people, or has become more valuable to people. So that will continue for a while. So that's one of the ones that I think is a fairly obvious one that should stay in place for a while.
Yeah, and I'll just add to that. I also think the shopping local thing might stay as well. So this was already a movement that some people were starting more from an environmental perspective. If we can shop local, buy local, we don't need to transport as much. Now it's changed focus a little bit because it's about helping your neighbor, being a part of your local community. I think a lot of people who've started purchasing local products realize that they are just as good, if not better, and I'm supporting my neighbors. I don't see that going away. In fact, I think that there's going to be a sense of community pride that's going to stay across. My neighbors helped me through this. My community is what got me through this disease, and I want to continue to support them. So I could easily see that being something that doesn't quite go away as well.
Right. And then another area a little bit along those lines is clean label enthusiasts were already pushing very heavily in sustainability space. And if you imagine the amount of refuse that is being built because of all the out of stock and all the extra product at home that people are seeing cycle through their garbage, I expect that the clean label enthusiasts that movement that they're really pushing around sustainability is going to continue to grow. And I think it'll actually start taking off even with greater momentum because there's going to be such a right in your face realization here as this continues of just how much we're pushing on the environment. The other thing that we're seeing because of the news around how well the environment is shifting and changing by not having all this pollution, et cetera, so forth, that will also serve to fuel this idea that sustainability, and especially when it comes to packaging products and manufacturing of products, types of ingredients that are viewed more sustainable, all of those things I think are going to come together, and you're going to see that movement take off even stronger than it had been. All right.
Any other questions?
Yeah.
Oh, here we go. Perfect. Do you think that once we resume our somewhat normal lives and when kids' extracurricular activities resume, everyone's schedules will get busy again and family dinners will be on the fly as they once were?
Yeah, that's a good question. This one's a little tough. My intuition is that we're not going to see that on the fly mindset return until we see full large crowds being safe again. So think about basketball, baseball arenas being completely packed, and everybody being able to shuttle their kids to and from all the sporting events and all the extracurricular activities. I don't think until we see that come back full stroke, I don't think we're going to see the on the go component of our meal repertoire come back to normal, pre-COVID normal.
Yeah, I also, and again, I'm thinking to the future, and I certainly don't have a crystal ball, but I think there's some element where people are realizing the value of that family time and the meal. So they saw what it was like without, and now they're getting used to it. I think a big part of it is how long will this last? How much does this get ingrained in our daily habits? Is this something that's a month? Maybe it changes really quickly to the way it once was. But I think the longer this period of being at home interacting with your families is the norm, I think the longer it's going to take before it changes back to that other behavior again. And it might not come back to the completely on the fly. It might be that now there is a prioritization for that family time and people find a way to make that happen.
I agree, and a lot has to do also with the work from home scenario. How long is that? I think we're going to see a lot of businesses realize productivity value in certain sectors is going up. So as long as that's continuing, then you have that family time interaction is going to be much more heightened as well. So I think we'll continue to see it certainly at some level, without a doubt. All right, well, this is as much time as we have for today. Thank you all for staying on for the full webinar today. As we get into next month, just a quick look ahead, upcoming webinars. We've got a product innovation webinar coming up on May 14th, looking at disruptive product innovation, and we're gonna have our guest Cullinex with us on that session. And then part 2 of this webinar, which is going to go a lot more into some of the product categories and specifically how shopping for those have been shifting and changing, and volume has been moving around, and why that's happening, will be coming out in the middle of May, on May 21st. So I look forward to having everybody back with us again at our upcoming webinars, and thank you very much for all your time today.
Yeah, thank you, everyone.